What's up, guys? So I have not been posting too much recently, even though I have 3 videos up, because I have been busy with school and have been busy dealing with life and such. So I'm gonna be here and rating some of the NBA's polarizing, if you can call it that, trades so far this offseason out of 10. I have some written down on here and others I'll be looking up. So to start off, we have the Chris Paul to Phoenix trade, which involved Ricky Rubio and Kelly Oubre. I'm going to give this one a solid 9 out of 10. The Phoenix Suns get an upgrade from Rubio. Of course, Monty Williams is the coach who coached Chris Paul during the New Orleans Hornets days. And because of the fact he's played a pivotal role in Dennis Schroeder's growth as a player, as well as helping out Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with his overall game, I feel like I have that same effect in Phoenix when it comes to Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. Plus, they signed very solid veterans in Jay Crowder and E'Twaun Moore. Jay just came off a run with the Miami Heat against the Los Angeles Lakers. He was a very pivotal part in helping the Miami Heat get there. And E'Twaun Moore is a really solid shooter. Plus, they re-signed Dario Saric, who is an absolute sniper for them. So this is a very solid move overall because of the moves they made after that. This is a playoff-bound team. Great job by the Phoenix Suns. So this next move I'll be rating out of 10 is the Jrue Holiday to the Milwaukee Bucks trade. This move is a 10 out of 10. So now looking back at my Miami Heat video that I made, I understand that my take about Jrue Holiday going there, or potentially going there at least, did not age particularly well. And somehow my Avery Bradley take did, and they kept Goran Dragic in the process. But I'm focusing on the Milwaukee Bucks trading for Jrue Holiday. This trade is a solid 10 out of 10, mainly because they get an upgrade at the point guard position and they get a better shot creator than Eric Bledsoe, because Bledsoe, even though he's a 20-point per game scorer in the regular season, he severely underperforms in the playoffs. Jrue, on the other hand, performed well beyond expectations in the last playoffs he was in, which was 2018 with the Pelicans, where he had monster after monster performances, especially in the first round against Portland. The Bucks get an upgrade from what Bledsoe provided, and they get a much better version of that in Jrue Holiday. And plus, offensively, Bledsoe proved time and again, especially in the 2019 and 2020 playoffs, he was a black hole on offense. Jrue Holiday, on the other hand, can be an upgrade on offense, and he is the shot creator that Giannis needs. Plus, you add in the factors of them getting Bryn Forbes, who is a great shooter, Torrey Craig, who's a great defender, DJ Augustin, who is a solid backup point guard, and Bobby Portis, who is an energy player. Arguably, the Bucks had probably one of their best off seasons in their franchise history, and I think this is a perfect team around Giannis. So this is why I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. I guess I should also bring up Steven Adams to the Pelicans. Solid big man. He can play pick and roll with Lonzo. Has a good finish around the basket. Good rim protector. Can play next to Zion. I guess he's not the perfect big, but he is a perfect piece for this Pelicans team. And then Eric Bledsoe, well, he's Eric Bledsoe. So I can't really tell how he's going to do with the Pelicans. And then George Hill might request a buyout and go to another contender. So either way, it's a 10 out of 10. So the next trade I'll be grading is the Robert Covington to the Blazers trade. This trade is a solid 9 out of 10. I say this because Robert Covington is a solid role player, a great shooter and great defender, as we've seen with both Philadelphia and Houston. The Blazers have been really lacking in wings who can defend people like LeBron James and Kevin Durant. They had that in Al-Farouq Aminu and Maurice Harkless in their run to the conference finals, but neither of them were great shooters despite them being magnificent defenders. They also had Trevor Ariza to kind of help them, but the thing is, Ariza wasn't going to be Houston Rocket Ariza. Plus, he was getting up there in age, and also he was out for the bubble. So having Rocco on your team can help make a huge difference. Now you add on top of the fact that they re-signed Rodney Hood and Melo, and they get Derrick Jones Jr., who's a super athletic guy and a pretty good defender, and you get a young center in Harry Giles III. Solid young center, and then you have Enes Kanter back, who also played a pivotal part in their run to the conference finals. So I would give this move a 9 out of 10. The only reason I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10 is because they do not have a power forward that I know of that can play defense. Maybe you can argue Zach Collins being in that position, but overall the Rocco trade gives them a solid shooter and defender, and on top of that, the Portland Trailblazers got better in the process. So this is a 9 out of 10. So this trade is not necessarily a 3-team trade, but this is a trade that involves a lot of moving pieces to different teams. So this is the Dennis Schroeder to the Lakers trade, which involved Danny Green going to the Philadelphia 76ers along with Terrence Ferguson, and then Al Horford going to the OKC Thunder. I am giving this one a 10 out of 10. The Lakers needed a point guard to help run the offense outside of LeBron and AD. Dennis Schroeder came off a career-high 18 points per game in his last season with Oklahoma City, and he is instant offense, which is what the Lakers need, because in the finals, when LeBron or AD didn't have the ball, we gave the ball to Danny Green in the post. Okay, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but no, seriously, that is how bad our offense needed somebody to be an instant shot creator, because we know there are going to be teams that are going to have bounties on our heads, metaphorically, and teams are going to figure out that, hey, we can let someone who is not LeBron or AD beat us, and we quickly resolved that issue by signing Dennis Schroeder, who again came off his best season of his career. Also, Dennis Schroeder is younger. He's only 26 or 27 years old, and he is an absolute pest on defense. Danny Green, on the other hand, is getting up there in age, and he's been pretty inconsistent with his threes, but he is a nice addition to Philadelphia's roster, which I will get into in a minute. Plus, we got Montrezl Harrell, who's an absolute dog on offense with his physicality and size. And then we have Wes Matthews, who is also another physical and pesky defender who can shoot the 3-ball really well. And then we have Marc Gasol, who is a seasoned veteran who can still be a stellar offensive player at his age and still a good rim protector. So with this trade, and I'm going to be discussing this in my next video about can the Lakers repeat, this trade made the roster a whole lot better because we get a ball handler who can take pressure off LeBron and AD, and we get a solid replacement for Danny Green, and we get 2 physical big men. So overall, this Lakers roster is an improvement to what we had last season, and that's no disrespect to Avery Bradley, Danny Green, and Dwight Howard. Now, what about the Philadelphia 76ers? How did they benefit from this trade? I know in my Miami Heat video, I clowned Danny Green by saying that he was a straight brick show, but I kind of said that in a joking way because I still thought he was a great piece for us. But even though he was traded to Oklahoma City, Philadelphia gets rid of a bad contract in exchange for a solid 3-and-D guy, which is what the Sixers needed to build around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I made the point in my Sixers video that the roster with Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, and Al Horford being around Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid was not going to work out because of the poor fit and the bad contracts. So having Danny Green is a breath of fresh air because he is a spacer that Ben Simmons and Embiid need, and then Tobias Harris can still do Tobias Harris things. And then they got Seth Curry out of that too, which is the trade I will get into in a minute. And then Terrence Ferguson, well, he's probably a throw in there because he barely got any playing time, and I do think he's kind of trash. As well as for the OKC Thunder, that trade basically allows them to go into full rebuild mode, as I mentioned with Chris Paul and all the other assets that were traded. So the Danny Green, Dennis Schroeder trade is a 10 out of 10 for all teams involved. Alright, so this one's a bit of a doozy here, but it's kind of an underrated trade for this team in particular. But since the Suns traded for Chris Paul, the Ricky Rubio to Minnesota trade is an extremely underrated trade. So just like his former teammate Kelly Oubre Jr. as well as Danny Green, Ricky Rubio as well as Kelly and a bunch of young players were traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder in exchange for Chris Paul, and knowing that Oklahoma City and Sam Presti wanted to go into a full rebuild mode, they decided to trade Ricky back to his old team, the Minnesota Timberwolves. So after that disastrous 2017-18 season as well as a weird 2018-19 season, the Timberwolves want to go back to being a respectable team in the league. So far, they got D'Angelo Russell from the Golden State Warriors mid-season, and he's proven to be a better complementary scorer next to Karl Anthony Towns more than Andrew Wiggins ever was. And then they drafted Anthony Edwards, who was the #1 pick and who was bound to be a defensive stud. They also re-signed Malik Beasley, who is a great shooter and a great all-around offensive player. Defensively, I said he was a good 3-and-D guy in my Warriors video, but now that I looked at it, he is kind of sus on that end. But he's still great offensively. And then you have a much improving two-way player in Josh Okogie. So what impact would Rubio have on this team? Obviously, based on his last year with the Phoenix Suns and his seasons prior with the Jazz, Ricky will be a solid all-around presence for the young guys, and most likely he's probably going to be coming off the bench because I'm guessing the starting lineup will be D'Angelo Russell, Josh Okogie, Anthony Edwards. I'm assuming Juancho is going to be the starting power forward, and then you have Karl Anthony Towns to round up the starting lineup at center. And then you have a bench unit with Jarrett Culver, Ricky Rubio, and Malik Beasley. Again, Rubio is a solid veteran for the young guys. He'll help out the bench offense. And obviously, he knows Karl Anthony Towns from his last 2 seasons with the Timberwolves before getting traded to the Utah Jazz. So overall, this Ricky Rubio trade back to Minnesota, I would give a solid 8 out of 10. So this next trade is not going to be as in-depth as the other ones I mentioned because I think one team benefited more than the other team. So this trade, you can probably say, is a definite win and kind of win trade for both teams, depending on how you look at it. It is the Landry Shamet for Luke Kennard trade. So Luke Kennard averaged a career high 15.8 a game last year with Detroit, and he is an overall good shooter. He shot 39% from the field last year, as well as shooting 41% in his rookie year. So obviously, again, he's a great all-around shooter. But I'm not too high on this move either because the Clippers missed so many goddamn opportunities this offseason, as well as losing a lot of players. They got some okay players. Luke Kennard, I say, is pretty good. Serge Ibaka was their best signing, and then Nick Batum, well, what the hell were they thinking signing that guy? Now, obviously, this being a 3-team deal, Landry did not go to the Pistons. Rather, he went to the Brooklyn Nets. Provides a lot of shooting, can provide so much for the second unit off the bench, and then you get Bruce Brown, who's a good 3-and-D guy with a lot of upside. They signed a versatile forward in Jeff Green, and then they re-signed their sharpshooting guard Joe Harris. So the Luke Kennard trade is not a bad trade. Definitely the Nets were the biggest winners in this trade. The Clippers are not losers, but I wouldn't say they're winners either. So this is a pretty solid enough trade. I'm gonna have to give it a 7.5. Last but not least, I'll be talking about the Seth Curry trade to Philadelphia in exchange for Josh Richardson. As I pointed out, Philadelphia struggled all year with the fit and the poor spacing and the bad contracts. Luckily, they got Danny Green out of that, and now they get one of the best shooters in the NBA in Seth Curry. The past 4 years, Seth Curry has been shooting near 45% from 3, as well as near 50% from the entire field. He's a good overall player and a good shooter, and Curry will help out their bench offense if he comes off the bench, because I do think their starting lineup will be Ben Simmons, Danny Green, Matisse Thybulle, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. And then you have Seth and Shake Milton coming off the bench, which this roster gives a lot of spacing for Ben and Joel to work with. Now, when it comes to the Dallas Mavericks, Josh Richardson may not be the shooter that Seth is. Josh is still an above-average shooter, and he is a good backcourt defender, which is what the Dallas Mavericks need, despite them having guys like Michael Gilchrist and Dorian Finney-Smith, as well as big men like Maxi Kleber, who's a good defender, and Dwight Powell, who is also above average. I haven't watched too much of Dwight Powell. This Dallas Mavs team got a lot better as a defensive-minded team because Luka's not much of a defensive player, and Kristaps Porzingis is one of those empty shot blocker type defenders. Still, this Mavs roster really improved on what they had last season. My only issue with this is I don't know if Josh Richardson is going to start over Tim Hardaway Jr. because Tim Hardaway is a better shooter than Richardson, but Jay Rich is a better defender than Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't know, man. It's a conundrum, but this Seth Curry-Josh Richardson trade ends up working out for both teams. So outside of the Dennis Schroeder trade, which is obviously my favorite because I'm a Laker fan, this is a definite 10 out of 10. So overall, this short offseason was pretty exciting. Even though the names were kind of blah, it was still exciting to watch teams ramping up their rosters, and then, you know, teams like the Clippers pulling average Clipper moves. So overall, despite the offseason being short as it is, I think this next upcoming season will be pretty exciting to watch. That's all the trades I'll be talking about. I'm not going to be talking about the random 3-team DeLon Wright for James Johnson trade, that 3-team deal that involved Trevor Ariza, because it's kind of an irrelevant trade. I guess the Mavs benefited the most because they get a defensive stud in James Johnson, but that's as far as I'll say about it. These are the major offseason trades, or at least what I think were major offseason trades. So that'll be all. And again, I apologize for not posting up to speed. I've been really busy with school, and I've been trying to get my thoughts together for this particular video, as well as my Lakers video, which I was gonna post yesterday, but I ended up not doing it because I had to work on this video. Now I can get to work on my Lakers video. So this upcoming season is going to be really exciting. I really hope y'all are staying safe out there in this crazy, crazy world. I'm X. Deuces.